Welcome to today's Triple Z. The Triple Z podcast is a daily program that you can use to help you fall asleep each night. Just turn down the volume, lay back, relax, and enjoy as you fall asleep. We saw that our podcast was topping the charts in Malta, so we are going to read their Wikipedia entry. Let's learn about this interesting country in the dullest way possible. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to write us a review on your podcast platform and share us with a friend. You both might sleep just a little better at night. Our website is Triple Z, that's 3zs.media. You can also like and share our content on Facebook or our Instagram account zzz_media_podcast. Music for today's episode was provided by the Sleep channel on Spotify. Malta, officially the Republic of Malta, Maltese, Republika ta Malta, Republika ta Malta, is an island country in the Mediterranean Sea. It consists of an archipelago between Italy and Libya and is often considered a part of southern Europe. It lies 80 kilometers, 50 miles south of Sicily, Italy, 284 kilometers, 176 miles east of Tunisia, and 333 kilometers, 207 miles north of Libya. The official languages are Maltese and English, and 66% of the current Maltese population is at least conversational in the Italian language. Malta has been inhabited since approximately 5900 BC. Its location in the center of the Mediterranean has historically given it great strategic importance as a naval base, with a succession of powers having contested and ruled the islands, including the Phoenicians and Carthaginians, Romans, Greeks, Arabs, Normans, Aragonese, Knights of St. John, French, and British, amongst others. With a population of about 516,000 over an area of 316 square kilometers, 122 square miles, Malta is the world's 10th smallest country in area and 4th most densely populated sovereign country. Its capital is Valletta, which is the smallest national capital in the European Union by area and population. According to the data from 2020 by Eurostat, the functional urban area and metropolitan region covered the whole island and has a population of 480,134, and according to the United Nations, ESPON and EU Commission, the whole territory of Malta constitutes a single urban region. Malta increasingly is referred to as a city-state and also listed in rankings concerning cities or metropolitan areas. Malta became a British colony in 1813, serving as a way station for ships and the headquarters for the British Mediterranean Fleet. It was besieged by the Axis powers during World War II and was an important Allied base for operations in North Africa and the Mediterranean. The British Parliament passed the Malta Independence Act in 1964, giving Malta independence from the United Kingdom as the State of Malta, with Elizabeth II as its queen. The country became a republic in 1974. It has been a member state of the Commonwealth of Nations and the United Nations since independence, and joined the European Union in 2004. It became part of the Eurozone Monetary Union in 2008. Malta has had Christians since the time of early Christianity, though was predominantly Muslim while under Arab rule, at which time Christians were tolerated. Muslim rule ended with the Norman invasion of Malta by Roger I in 1091. Today, Catholicism is the state religion, but the Constitution of Malta guarantees freedom of conscience and religious worship. The economy of Malta is heavily reliant on tourism, and the country promotes itself as a Mediterranean tourist destination with its warmer climate compared to the rest of Europe, numerous recreational areas, and architectural and historical monuments, including 3 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, Halsaflini Hypogeum, Valletta, and 7 megalithic temples, which are some of the oldest freestanding structures in the world. The origin of the name Malta is uncertain, and the modern-day variation is derived from the Maltese language. The most common etymology is that the word Malta is derived from the Greek word mulandiota, meli, honey. The ancient Greeks called the island Mu Epsilon Landitaueda, melite, meaning honey sweet, possibly for Malta's unique production of honey. An endemic subspecies of bees live on the island. The Romans called the island Melita, which can be considered either a Latinization of the Greek Mu Epsilon Landitaueda or the adaptation of the Doric Greek pronunciation of the same word Mu Epsilon Landitau Alpha. In 1525, William Tyndall used the transliteration melite in Acts 28 verse 1 for Kappa Alpha Delta Iota Alpha Sigma Omega Theta Nu Tau Epsilon Tau Tau Epsilon Pi Gamma Nu Omega Mu Epsilon Nu Tau Iota Mu Epsilon Lambda Tau Eta Nu Sigma Omicron Kappa Alpha Lambda Epsilon Tau Alpha Iota. After we were brought safely through, we then learned that the island was called Melita, as found in his translation of the New Testament that relied on Greek texts instead of Latin. Melita is the spelling used in the Authorized King James Version of 1611 and the American Standard Version of 1901. Malta is widely used in more recent versions, such as the Revised Standard Version of 1946 and the New International Version of 1973. Another conjecture suggests that the word Malta comes from the Phoenician word Maleth, a haven or port, in reference to Malta's many bays and coves. Few other etymological mentions appear in classical literature, with the term Malta appearing in its present form in the Antonine Itinerary. Malta has been inhabited from around 5900 BC, since the arrival of settlers originating from European Neolithic agriculturalists. A significant prehistoric Neolithic culture marked by megalithic structures, which date back to c. 3600 BC, existed on the islands, as evidenced by the temples of Bujiba, Najdra, Gantija, and others. The Phoenicians colonized Malta between 800 and 700 BC, bringing their Semitic language and culture. They used the islands as an outpost from which they expanded sea explorations and trade in the Mediterranean until their successors, the Carthaginians, were ousted by the Romans in 216 BC with the help of the Maltese inhabitants, under whom Malta became a municipium. After a probable sack by the Vandals, Malta fell under Byzantine rule, 4th to 9th century, and the islands were then invaded by the Aghlabids in AD 870. The fate of the population after the Arab invasion is unclear, but it seems the islands may have been repopulated at the beginning of the second millennium by settlers from Arab-ruled Sicily who spoke Siculo-Arabic. The Muslim rule was ended by the Normans, who conquered the island in 1091. The islands were completely re-Christianized by 1249. The islands were part of the Kingdom of Sicily until 1530 and were briefly controlled by the Capetian House of Anjou. In 1530, Charles V of Spain gave the Maltese Islands to the Order of Knights of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem in perpetual lease. The French under Napoleon took hold of the Maltese Islands in 1798, although with the aid of the British the Maltese were able to oust French control 2 years later. The inhabitants subsequently asked Britain to assume sovereignty over the islands under the conditions laid out in a Declaration of Rights, stating that His Majesty has no right to cede these islands to any power if he chooses to withdraw his protection and abandon his sovereignty, the right of electing another sovereign, or of the governing of these islands, belongs to us, the inhabitants and aborigines alone, and without control. As part of the Treaty of Paris in 1814, Malta became a British colony. It ultimately rejected an attempted integration with the United Kingdom in 1956 after the British proved reluctant to integrate. Malta became independent on September 21, 1964, Independence Day. Under its 1964 constitution, Malta initially retained Elizabeth II as queen, with a governor-general exercising authority on her behalf. On December 13, 1974, Republic Day, it became a republic within the Commonwealth, with the president as head of state. On March 31, 1979, Malta saw the withdrawal of the last British troops and the Royal Navy from Malta. This day is known as Freedom Day, and Malta declared itself as a neutral and non-aligned state. Malta joined the European Union on May 1, 2004, and joined the Eurozone on January 1, 2008. Pottery found by archaeologists at the Scorba temples resembles that found in Italy and suggests that the Maltese islands were first settled in 5200 BC mainly by Stone Age hunters or farmers who had arrived from the Italian island of Sicily, possibly the Sicani. The extinction of the dwarf hippos, giant swans, and dwarf elephants has been linked to the earliest arrival of humans on Malta. Prehistoric farming settlements dating to the early Neolithic period were discovered in open areas and also in caves, such as Gardalam. The Sicani were the only tribe known to have inhabited the island at this time and are generally regarded as being closely related to the Iberians. The population on Malta grew cereals, raised livestock, and, in common with other ancient Mediterranean cultures, worshipped a fertility figure represented in Maltese prehistoric artifacts exhibiting the proportions seen in similar statuettes, including the Venus of Willendorf. Pottery from the Gardalam phase is similar to pottery found in Agrigento, Sicily. A culture of megalithic temple builders then either supplanted or arose from this early period. Around the time of 3500 BC, these people built some of the oldest existing freestanding structures in the world in the form of the megalithic Gantija temples on Gozo. Other early temples include those at Hagar Kim and Najdra. The temples have distinctive architecture, typically a complex trefoil design, and were used from 4000 to 2500 BC. Animal bones and a knife found behind a removable altar stone suggest that temple rituals included animal sacrifice. Tentative information suggests that the sacrifices were made to the goddess of fertility, whose statue is now in the National Museum of Archaeology in Valletta. The culture apparently disappeared from the Maltese islands around 2500 BC. Archaeologists speculate that the temple builders fell victim to famine or disease, but this is not certain. Another archaeological feature of the Maltese islands often attributed to these ancient builders is equidistant uniform groups dubbed cart tracks or cart ruts, which can be found in several locations throughout the islands, with the most prominent being those found in Misragara, which is informally known as Clapham Junction. These may have been caused by wooden-wheeled carts eroding soft limestone. After 2500 BC, the Maltese islands were depopulated for several decades until the arrival of a new influx of Bronze Age immigrants, a culture that cremated its dead and introduced smaller megalithic structures called dolmens to Malta. In most cases, there are small chambers here, with the cover made of a large slab placed on upright stones. They are claimed to belong to a population certainly different from that which built the previous megalithic temples. It is presumed the population arrived from Sicily because of the similarity of Maltese dolmens to some small constructions found on the largest island of the Mediterranean Sea. Phoenician traders colonized the island sometime after 1000 BC as a stop on their trade routes from the eastern Mediterranean to Cornwall, joining the natives on the island. The Phoenicians inhabited the area now known as Medina and its surrounding town of Rabat, which they called Maleth. The Romans, who also much later inhabited Medina, referred to it and the island as Melita. After the fall of Phoenicia in 332 BC, the area came under the control of Carthage, a former Phoenician colony. During this time, the people on Malta mainly cultivated olives and carob and produced textiles. During the First Punic War, the island was conquered after harsh fighting by Marcus Atilius Regulus. After the failure of his expedition, the island fell back in the hands of Carthage, only to be conquered again in 218 BC during the Second Punic War by Roman consul Tiberius Sempronius Longus. After that, Malta became Foederata Civitas, a designation that meant it was exempt from paying tribute or the rule of Roman law, and fell within the jurisdiction of the province of Sicily. Punic influence, however, remained vibrant on the islands, with the famous city of Melkart pivotal in deciphering the Punic language, dedicated in the 2nd century BC. Also, the local Roman coinage, which ceased in the 1st century BC, indicates the slow pace of the island's Romanization, since the last locally minted coins still bear inscriptions in ancient Greek on the obverse, like mu epsilon lambda iota tau alpha iota omega, meaning of the Maltese, and Punic motifs, showing the resistance of the Greek and Punic cultures. In the 1st century BC, Roman senator and orator Cicero commented on the importance of the Temple of Juno, and on the extravagant behavior of the Roman governor of Sicily, Verres. During the 1st century BC, the island was mentioned by Pliny the Elder and Diodorus Siculus. The latter praised its harbors, the wealth of its inhabitants, its lavishly decorated houses, and the quality of its textile products. In the 2nd century, Emperor Hadrian, r. 117–38, upgraded the status of Malta to municipium or free town. The island local affairs were administered by 4 quatuor viri jurisdicundo and a municipal senate, while a Roman procurator, living in Dinah, represented the proconsul of Sicily. In 58 AD, Paul the Apostle was washed up on the islands together with Luke the Evangelist after their ship was wrecked on the islands. Paul the Apostle remained on the islands for 3 months, preaching the Christian faith. The island is mentioned at the Acts of the Apostles as Melitene, Greek, mu epsilon lambda iota tau nu eta. In 395, when the Roman Empire was divided for the last time at the death of Theodosius I, Malta, following Sicily, fell under the control of the Western Roman Empire. During the migration period, as the Western Roman Empire declined, Malta came under attack and was conquered or occupied a number of times. From 454 to 464, the islands were subdued by the Vandals, and after 464 by the Ostrogoths. In 533, Belisarius, on his way to conquer the Vandal kingdom in North Africa, reunited the islands under imperial Eastern rule. Little is known about the Byzantine rule in Malta. The island depended on the theme of Sicily and had Greek governors and a small Greek garrison. While the bulk of population continued to be constituted by the old, Latinized dwellers, during this period its religious allegiance oscillated between the Pope and the Patriarch of Constantinople. The Byzantine rule introduced Greek families to the Maltese collective. Malta remained under the Byzantine Empire until 870, when it fell to the Arabs. Malta became involved in the Arab-Byzantine Wars, and the conquest of Malta is closely linked with that of Sicily that began in 827 after Admiral Euphemius' betrayal of his fellow Byzantines, requesting that the Aghlabids invade the island. The Muslim chronicler and geographer Al-Himyari recounts that in 870, following a violent struggle against the defending Byzantines, the Arab invaders, first led by Khalaf al-Hadim and later by Sawada ibn Muhammad, looted and pillaged the island, destroying the most important buildings and leaving it practically uninhabited until it was recolonized by the Arabs from Sicily in 1048 to 1049. It is uncertain whether this new settlement took place as a consequence of demographic expansion in Sicily, as a result of a higher standard of living in Sicily, in which case the recolonization may have taken place a few decades earlier, or as a result of civil war which broke out among the Arab rulers of Sicily in 1038. The Arab agricultural revolution introduced new irrigation, some fruits and cotton, and the Siculo-Arabic language was adopted on the island from Sicily. It would eventually evolve into the Maltese language. The Normans attacked Malta in 1091 as part of their conquest of Sicily. The Norman leader, Roger I of Sicily, was welcomed by Christian captives. The notion that Count Roger I reportedly tore off a portion of his checkered red and white banner and presented it to the Maltese in gratitude for having fought on his behalf, forming the basis of the modern flag of Malta, is founded in myth. Malta became part of the newly formed Kingdom of Sicily, which also covered the island of Sicily and the southern half of the Italian peninsula. The Catholic Church was reinstated as the state religion, with Malta under the See of Palermo, and some Norman architecture sprang up around Malta, especially in its ancient capital Dinah. King Tancred made Malta a fief of the kingdom and installed the Count of Malta in 1192. As the islands were much desired due to their strategic importance, it was during this time that the men of Malta were militarized to fend off attempted conquest. Early counts were skilled Genoese privateers. The kingdom passed on to the Hohenstaufen dynasty from 1194 until 1266. During this period, when Emperor Frederick II began to reorganize his Sicilian kingdom, Western culture and religion began to exert their influence more intensely. Malta was declared a county and a marquisate, but its trade was totally ruined. For a long time, it remained solely a fortified garrison. A mass expulsion of Arabs occurred in 1224, and the entire Christian male population of Celano in Abruzzo was deported to Malta in the same year. In 1249, Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor, decreed that all remaining Muslims be expelled from Malta or compelled to convert. For a brief period, the kingdom passed to the Capetian House of Anjou, but high taxes made the dynasty unpopular in Malta, due in part to Charles of Anjou's war against the Republic of Genoa, and the island of Gozo was sacked in 1275. Malta was ruled by the House of Barcelona, the ruling dynasty of the Crown of Aragon, from 1282 to 1409, with the Aragonese aiding the Maltese insurgents in the Sicilian Vespers in the naval battle in Grand Harbour in 1283. Relatives of the kings of Aragon ruled the island until 1409, when it formally passed to the Crown of Aragon. Early on in the Aragonese ascendancy, the sons of the monarchs received the title Count of Malta. During this time, much of the local nobility was created. By 1397, however, the bearing of the comital title reverted to a feudal basis, with two families fighting over the distinction, which caused some conflict. This led King Martin I of Sicily to abolish the title. The dispute over the title returned when the title was reinstated a few years later, and the Maltese, led by the local nobility, rose up against Count Gonsalvo Monroy. Although they opposed the Count, the Maltese voiced their loyalty to the Sicilian crown, which so impressed King Alfonso that he did not punish the people for their rebellion. Instead, he promised never to grant the title to a third party and incorporated it back into the crown. The city of Medina was given the title of Cita Notable as a result of this sequence of events. On March 23, 1530, Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, gave the islands to the Knights Hospitaller under the leadership of Frenchman Philippe Villiers de l'Isle-Adam, Grand Master of the Order, in perpetual lease for which they had to pay an annual tribute of a single Maltese falcon. These knights, a military religious order also known as the Order of St. John and later as the Knights of Malta, had been driven out of Rhodes by the Ottoman Empire in 1522. The Knights Hospitaller were the rulers of Malta and Gozo between 1530 and 1798. During this period, the strategic and military importance of the island grew greatly as the small yet efficient fleet of the Order of St. John launched their attacks from this new base, targeting the shipping lanes of the Ottoman territories around the Mediterranean Sea. In 1551, the population of the island of Gozo, around 5,000 people, were enslaved by Barbary pirates and taken to the Barbary coast in North Africa. The Knights, led by Frenchman Jean Parasat de Valette, Grand Master of the Order, withstood the Great Siege of Malta by the Ottomans in 1565. The Knights, with the help of Spanish and Maltese forces, were victorious and repelled the attack. Speaking of the battle, Voltaire said, "Nothing is better known than the siege of Malta." After the siege, they decided to increase Malta's fortifications, particularly in the inner harbor area, where the new city of Valletta, named in honor of Valette, was built. They also established watchtowers along the coasts, the Wignacourt, Lascaris, and Derriden towers, named after the Grand Masters who ordered the work. The Knights' presence on the island saw the completion of many architectural and cultural projects, including the embellishment of Città Vittoriosa, modern Birgu, the construction of new cities including Città Rohan, modern Has-Sebug. Has-Sebug is one of the oldest cities of Malta. It also has one of the largest squares of Malta. The Knights' reign ended when Napoleon captured Malta on his way to Egypt during the French Revolutionary Wars in 1798. Over the years preceding Napoleon's capture of the islands, the power of the Knights had declined and the order had become unpopular. Napoleon's fleet arrived in 1798 en route to his expedition of Egypt. As a ruse towards the Knights, Napoleon asked for a safe harbor to resupply his ships, and then turned his guns against his hosts once safely inside Valletta. Grand Master Hompesch capitulated, and Napoleon entered Malta. During 12 to 18 June 1798, Napoleon resided at the Palazzo Parisio in Valletta. He reformed national administration with the creation of a government commission, 12 municipalities, a public finance administration, the abolition of all feudal rights and privileges, the abolition of slavery, and the granting of freedom to all Turkish and Jewish slaves. On the judicial level, a family code was framed and 12 judges were nominated. Public education was organized along principles laid down by Bonaparte himself, providing for primary and secondary education. He then sailed for Egypt, leaving a substantial garrison in Malta. The French forces left behind became unpopular with the Maltese, due particularly to the French forces' hostility towards Catholicism and pillaging of local churches to fund Napoleon's war efforts. French financial and religious policies so angered the Maltese that they rebelled, forcing the French to depart. Great Britain, along with the Kingdom of Naples and the Kingdom of Sicily, sent ammunition and aid to the Maltese, and Britain also sent its navy, which blockaded the islands. On October 28, 1798, Captain Sir Alexander Ball successfully completed negotiations with the French garrison on Gozo, the 217 French soldiers there agreeing to surrender without a fight and transferring the island to the British. The British transferred the island to the locals that day, and it was administered by Archpriest Saverio Casser on behalf of Ferdinand III of Sicily. Gozo remained independent until Casser was removed from power by the British in 1801. General Claude-Henri Belgrand de Vaubois surrendered his French forces in 1800. Maltese leaders presented the main island to Sir Alexander Ball, asking that the island become a British dominion. The Maltese people created a Declaration of Rights in which they agreed to come under the protection and sovereignty of the King of the Free People, His Majesty the King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. The declaration also stated that His Majesty has no right to cede these islands to any power if he chooses to withdraw his protection and abandon his sovereignty. The right of electing another sovereign or of the governing of these islands belongs to us, the inhabitants and aborigines alone, and without control. In 1814, as part of the Treaty of Paris, Malta officially became a part of the British Empire and was used as a shipping way station and fleet headquarters. After the Suez Canal opened in 1869, Malta's position halfway between the Strait of Gibraltar and Egypt proved to be its main asset, and it was considered an important stop on the way to India, a central trade route for the British. A Turkish military cemetery was commissioned by Sultan Abdulaziz and built between 1873 and 1874 for the fallen Ottoman soldiers of the Great Siege of Malta. Between 1915 and 1918, during the First World War, Malta became known as the Nurse of the Mediterranean due to the large number of wounded soldiers who were accommodated in Malta. In 1919, British troops fired into a crowd protesting against new taxes, killing 4. The event, known as Set Giugno, Italian for June 7th, is commemorated every year and is one of 5 national days. Before the Second World War, Valletta was the location of the Royal Navy's Mediterranean Fleet's headquarters. However, despite Winston Churchill's objections, the command was moved to Alexandria, Egypt, in April 1937 out of fear that it was too susceptible to air attacks from Europe. During the Second World War, Malta played an important role for the Allies, being a British colony situated close to Sicily and the Axis shipping lanes. Malta was bombarded by the Italian and German air forces. Malta was used by the British to launch attacks on the Italian Navy and had a submarine base. It was also used as a listening post, intercepting German radio messages, including Enigma traffic. The bravery of the Maltese people during the Second Siege of Malta moved King George VI to award the George Cross to Malta on a collective basis on April 15, 1942, to bear witness to a heroism and devotion that will long be famous in history. Some historians argue that the award caused Britain to incur disproportionate losses in defending Malta, as British credibility would have suffered if Malta had surrendered, as British forces in Singapore had done. A depiction of the George Cross now appears in the upper hoist corner of the flag of Malta and on the country's arms. The collective award remained unique until April 1999, when the Royal Ulster Constabulary became the second recipient of a collective George Cross. Malta achieved its independence as the State of Malta on September 21, 1964, Independence Day, after intense negotiations with the United Kingdom, led by Maltese Prime Minister George Borg-Olivier. Under its 1964 constitution, Malta initially retained Queen Elizabeth II as Queen of Malta and thus head of state, with a Governor-General exercising executive authority on her behalf. In 1971, the Malta Labour Party led by Dom Mintoff won the general elections, resulting in Malta declaring itself a republic on December 13, 1974, Republic Day, within the Commonwealth, with a president as head of state. A defense agreement was signed soon after independence, and after being renegotiated in 1972, expired on March 31, 1979, Freedom Day. Upon its expiry, the British base closed down and all lands formerly controlled by the British on the island were given up to the Maltese government. In the aftermath of the departure of the remaining British troops from the island in 1979, the country intensified its participation in the non-aligned movement. Malta adopted a policy of neutrality in 1980. In 1989, Malta was the venue of a summit between U.S. President George H. W. Bush and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, their first face-to-face encounter, which signaled the end of the Cold War. On July 16, 1990, Malta, through its foreign minister, Guido de Marco, applied to join the European Union. After tough negotiations, a referendum was held on March 8, 2003, which resulted in a favorable vote. General elections held on April 12, 2003, gave a clear mandate to the Prime Minister Edi Fenech-Adami to sign the Treaty of Accession to the European Union on April 16, 2003 in Athens, Greece. Malta joined the European Union on May 1, 2004. Following the European Council of 21 to 22 June 2007, Malta joined the Eurozone on January 1, 2008. Malta is a republic whose parliamentary system and public administration are closely modeled on the Westminster system. Malta had the second highest voter turnout in the world and the highest for nations without mandatory voting based on election turnout in national lower house elections from 1960 to 1995. The unicameral parliament is made up of the President of Malta and the House of Representatives, Maltese, Kamra Deputati. The President of Malta, a largely ceremonial position, is appointed for a 5-year term by a resolution of the House of Representatives carried by a simple majority. The House of Representatives has 65 members, elected for a 5-year term in 13 5-seat electoral divisions, called Distretti elettorali, with constitutional amendments that allow for mechanisms to establish strict proportionality amongst seats and votes of political parliamentary groups. Members of the House of Representatives are elected by direct universal suffrage through single transferable vote every 5 years, unless the House is dissolved earlier by the President either on the advice of the Prime Minister or through the adoption of a motion of no confidence carried within the House of Representatives and not overturned within 3 days. In either of these cases, the President may alternatively choose to invite another member of Parliament who invariably should command the majority of the House of Representatives to form an alternative government for the remainder of the legislature. The House of Representatives is nominally made up of 65 members of Parliament, whereby 5 members of Parliament are elected from each of the 13 electoral districts. However, where a party wins an absolute majority of votes but does not have a majority of seats, that party is given additional seats to ensure a parliamentary majority. The 80th article of the Constitution of Malta provides that the President appoint as Prime Minister the member of the House of Representatives who, in his judgment, is best able to command the support of a majority of the members of that House. Maltese politics is a two-party system dominated by the Labour Party, Maltese, Partit Laburista, a centre-left social democratic party, and the Nationalist Party, Maltese, Partit Naționalista, a centre-right Christian democratic party. The Labour Party has been the governing party since 2013 and is currently led by Prime Minister Robert Abela, who has been in office since January 13, 2020. The Nationalist Party, with Bernard Grech as its leader, is currently in opposition. There are a number of small political parties in Malta which have no parliamentary representation. Until the Second World War, Maltese politics was dominated by the language question fought out by Italophone and Anglophone parties. Post-war politics dealt with constitutional questions on the relations with Britain, first with integration then independence, and, eventually, relations with the European Union. Since Malta is a republic, the head of state in Malta is the President of the Republic. The current President of the Republic is George Vella, who was appointed in 2019 after being nominated both by the Labour Party and the Nationalist Party as opposition. He is the 10th president to be appointed. Malta has had a system of local government since 1993, based on the European Charter of Local Self-Government. The country is divided into 5 regions, one of them being Gozo, with each region having its own regional committee, serving as the intermediate level between local government and national government. The regions are divided into local councils, of which there are currently 68, 54 in Malta and 14 in Gozo. The 6 districts, 5 on Malta and the 6th being Gozo, serve primarily statistical purposes. Each council is made up of a number of councillors, from 5 to 13, depending on and relative to the population they represent. A mayor and a deputy mayor are elected by and from the councillors. The executive secretary, who is appointed by the council, is the executive, administrative, and financial head of the council. Councillors are elected every 4 years through the single transferable vote. People who are eligible to vote in the election of the Maltese House of Representatives as well as resident citizens of the EU are eligible to vote. Due to system reforms, no elections were held before 2012. Since then, elections have been held every 2 years for an alternating half of the councils. Local councils are responsible for the general upkeep and embellishment of the locality, including repairs to non-arterial roads, allocation of local wardens, and refuse collection. They also carry out general administrative duties for the central government, such as the collection of government rents and funds, and answer government-related public inquiries. Additionally, a number of individual towns and villages in the Republic of Malta have sister cities. The objectives of the Armed Forces of Malta, AFM, are to maintain a military organization with the primary aim of defending the island's integrity according to the defense roles as set by the government in an efficient and cost-effective manner. This is achieved by emphasizing the maintenance of Malta's territorial waters and airspace integrity. The AFM also engages in combating terrorism, fighting against illicit drug trafficking, conducting anti-illegal immigrant operations and patrols, and anti-illegal fishing operations, operating search and rescue, SAR, services, and physical or electronic security and surveillance of sensitive locations. Malta's search and rescue area extends from east of Tunisia to west of Crete, covering an area of around 250,000 square kilometers, 97,000 square miles. As a military organization, the AFM provides backup support to the Malta Police Force, MPF, and other government departments/agencies in situations as required in an organized, disciplined manner in the event of national emergencies, such as natural disasters or internal security and bomb disposal. In 2020, Malta signed and ratified the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Malta is an archipelago in the central Mediterranean, in its eastern basin, some 80 kilometers, 50 miles, from southern Italy across the Malta Channel. Only the 3 largest islands, Malta, Gozo, Godex, and Comino, Camiana, are inhabited. The islands of the archipelago lie on the Malta Plateau, a shallow shelf formed from the high points of a land bridge between Sicily and North Africa that became isolated as sea levels rose after the last ice age. The archipelago is located on the African tectonic plate. Malta was considered an island of North Africa for centuries. Numerous bays along the indented coastline of the islands provide good harbors. The landscape consists of low hills with terraced fields. The highest point in Malta is Todmetrek at 253 meters, 830 feet, near Dingley. Although there are some small rivers at times of high rainfall, there are no permanent rivers or lakes on Malta. However, some watercourses have fresh water running all year round at Barija near Ras Al Raheb, at El Taleb and San Martin, and at Lunsjata Valley in Gozo. Phytogeographically, Malta belongs to the Liguro-Tyrrhenian province of the Mediterranean region within the Boreal Kingdom. According to the WWF, the territory of Malta belongs to the terrestrial ecoregion of Tyrrhenian Adriatic sclerophyllus and mixed forests. The following uninhabited minor islands are part of the archipelago. Malta has a Mediterranean climate, Köppen climate classification CSA, with mild winters and hot summers, hotter in the inland areas. Rain occurs mainly in autumn and winter, with summer being generally dry. The average yearly temperature is around 23 degrees Celsius, 73 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and 15.5 degrees Celsius, 59.9 degrees Fahrenheit at night. In the coldest month, January, the typical maximum temperature ranges from 12 to 18 degrees Celsius, 54 to 64 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and minimum 6 to 12 degrees Celsius, 43 to 54 degrees Fahrenheit at night. In the warmest month, August, the typical maximum temperature ranges from 28 to 34 degrees Celsius, 82 to 93 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and minimum 20 to 24 degrees Celsius, 68 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit at night. Amongst all capitals in the continent of Europe, Valletta, the capital of Malta, has the warmest winters, with average temperatures of around 15 to 16 degrees Celsius, 59 to 61 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and 9 to 10 degrees Celsius, 48 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit at night in the period January-February. In March and December, average temperatures are around 17 degrees Celsius, 63 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and 11 degrees Celsius, 52 degrees Fahrenheit at night. Large fluctuations in temperature are rare. Snow is very rare on the island, although various snowfalls have been recorded in the last century, the last one reported in various locations across Malta in 2014. The average annual sea temperature is 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, from 15 to 16 degrees Celsius, 59 to 61 degrees Fahrenheit in February, to 26 degrees Celsius, 79 degrees Fahrenheit in August. In the 6 months, from June to November, the average sea temperature exceeds 20 degrees Celsius, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. The annual average relative humidity is high, averaging 75%, ranging from 65% in July morning, 78% evening, 53% to 80% in December morning, 83% evening, 73%. Sunshine duration hours total around 3,000 per year, from an average 5.2 hours of sunshine duration per day in December to an average above 12 hours in July. This is about double that of cities in the northern half of Europe. For comparison, London, 1,461. However, in winter it has up to 4 times more sunshine. For comparison, in December, London has 37 hours of sunshine, whereas Malta has above 160. According to Eurostat, Malta is composed of two larger urban zones nominally referred to as Valletta, the main island of Malta, and Gozo. The main urban area covers the entire main island, with a population of around 400,000. The core of the urban area, the greater city of Valletta, has a population of 205,768. According to the data from 2020 by Eurostat, the functional urban area and metropolitan region covered the whole island and has a population of 480,134. According to the United Nations, about 95% of the area of Malta is urban, and the number grows every year. Also, according to the results of a SPAN and EU Commission studies, the whole territory of Malta constitutes a single urban region. Occasionally in books, government publications and documents, and in some international institutions, Malta is referred to as a city-state. Sometimes Malta is listed in rankings concerning cities or metropolitan areas. Also, the Maltese coat of arms bears a mural crown described as representing the fortifications of Malta and denoting a city-state. Malta, with area of 316 square kilometers, 122 square miles, and population of over 0.5 million, is one of the most densely populated countries worldwide. Who reassigned the Islands and Small States Institute in Malta on April 29, 2022 as a collaborating center that included heavy work on topics like the development of policy recommendations on building health system resilience in small states, the interrelationship between tourism, health systems and sustainability, with a focus on islands and small countries, through a planetary health and equity approach and the development of a toolkit on health information, digital health and evidence generation in small states.